The Golden Age revealed. Trump has good instincts. You may hate him and what he says, but he is never wrong, even if sometimes his style causes him to be hyperbolic, but that is largely due to the tendency of this world to minimalize evil. That being said, the thing Trump is most associated with, "Make America Great Again," is a perfect example of instinct overreaching intelligence. People mock the slogan, asking when was America great? But we are not going to discuss that here. What we will discuss is the concept of the Golden Age. It is true that if we look at history, it never looks all that good. It is difficult to think of giving up electricity or computers. So, perhaps in terms of technology, the Golden Age is the present. This focus on technology might be considered a case of correlation not proving causation. Technology is neutral. If there was a golden age, the technology would enhance it. It would not make it any more than technology in a police state would make the police state one's preferred environment. The problem is we talk of a golden age or denigrate the idea without ever setting out the conditions that define a golden age. Naturally, most people would assume there would be no crime or poverty of other social problems, but this is not necessarily so. To some degree, context does matter. To look back at the 1800s is to see a time of gunfights, lynchings, corrupt politicians, and so on. Few of us would trade the situation we are in today for back then. For the people who fled Europe, potato famines and religious persecution, the idea of free land and freedom from persecution, this was about as good as it could get. But we are a product of our time. We do not look back at times of poor sanitation, little law, and the most primitive of conditions as ideal or anywhere near to it. The people had their freedom, compared to Europe, but we expect more than basic freedoms. The industrial age had more technology than the Neolithic, but that does not make it a period to idolize. But what if things were getting better for 6,000 years, then peaked? Would this apex not count as a golden age? This thinking is visible in Islam, where the period between 622–1258. It was noted for the translation of Greek texts into Arabic and the love of learning that the Arabs of the time adopted from the Greeks. However, this was brought to a close in the 1200s with the sack of Baghdad. To point out that America was never great is to miss the point. Make America Great Again is a call to make it greater by a return to the values of the past. In the narrative of the Golden Age, the time is not a time of perfection but a time when a culture peaked. The period after the II-ND/Sup World War was a time of great prosperity and progress. But this was also a time of reconstruction, which did gradually rebuild the Western economies in Japan. But if the Golden Age is a peak condition or state, there has to be an index value that would indicate where the nation was on a trajectory. Perhaps some might think gross national product, GNP, would serve as an indicator or progress. However, this index is too easily influenced by irrelevant factors, such as the destruction wrought by war. The idea of a golden age assumes there is a crucial or significant value, probably associated with the development of civilization, that if found in abundance produces a noble society, such as Athens and Rome at their height. Despite their well-known limitations, the societies of Rome and Athens had a golden age. They represented a high point in civilization, as did Britain during the Elizabethan to the Georgian eras. This was not a utopia, but it was the high point in British culture and power. But what was it about Rome, Athens, and Britain that gave them a golden age, and where is the corresponding era in the United States? Prosperity is not a neutral element. Even were not wealth a necessary prerequisite to having an advanced culture, one would not be much of an example to the world if one was not prosperous. But even more importantly, if a nation is undergoing a golden age, it ought to be doing something right that other nations are not, and this ought to translate into greater economic and political success. This makes sense, but it also throws a wrench into our discussion. A golden age is relative to the trajectory the world is on. The golden age of Rome was not necessarily something a person born into the modern era would wish to experience. This can be deceiving. The golden age of one nation may not look that notable for us who live in the modern age. The golden age of Britain is going to look much different from the golden age of America, even as it differs from the golden age of Islam. It has been said that wealth matters, but what gives rise to wealth? We know the earth is ideally adapted to life, but not necessarily civilization, let alone a golden age. This is why we need to work, and why, if we do not work or we work in a disorganized way, we live poor lives. We could, and some do, grab as much land as we can and work it the best we are able to. We could focus on individual rights and personal power to produce the things we need. We could move from place to place and reap what the land naturally provides. This is known as a hunter/gatherer lifestyle. The other is known as subsistence agriculture. Both of these options leave us working hard to produce little, which is why this type of life is easily replaced by more advanced peoples. War is all about attrition, and if a community cannot produce a substantial surplus, it cannot spare men for battle. The golden age is the military age. The golden age of any nation or people is the age at which it defeats its neighbors. There are scientific and cultural advances, but these are adjutants to the arm of the military. Without these things assisting militarily, and without the military being able to support and defend the more pacific accomplishments, all of it would be lost. Indeed, the fall of Rome and the decline of Britain, as well as the end of the golden age of Islam, all occurred as events conspired to bring the military to ruin. The golden age is an age in which the culture has a strong faith in its future. But military success is not solely about advances in military strategy and tactics. The culture does not just need to produce an Alexander or Napoleon, it has to produce surplus crops and techniques that permit it to produce the goods its military needs. There are 8 stages to a militaristic state. 1. Analytical. 2. Political. 3. Spiritual. 4. Cultural. 5. Alienate. 6. Legal. 7. Tactical. 8. Logistical. At the first stage, opponents argument and endeavor to undermine the other side's narrative. If this does not work, the argument becomes political. Propaganda is used. Other stakeholders become involved. If this kind of social pressure does not work, the opponent is demonized. Their character is assassinated. They are tied to one's conception of evil and made to appear morally repugnant. If all of this fails to have the desired effect, the argument moves into a cultural stage. In any conflict, the protagonists are initially at peace, or they would not now be going through the military scale. This does not mean there are not differences, but they are glossed over. If conflict reaches the point where cultural issues are brought to the fore, the opposition's culture is analyzed in order to highlight the differences. The culture of the other culture is portrayed as being alien. It is no longer a case where the two groups have differences, it is that the values and interests of the two groups are incompatible. It's akin to indicating that the two groups are inherently different kinds of people. They do not share a common humanity. And so, steps are made to alienate the other culture. Usually this means a decline in cultural exchanges. There is a reduction in the trade of things that are culturally significant for the other people. At some point, the state starts to bring the law into play. The enemy nation will be targeted for tariffs, bans, travel restrictions, and so on. After this stage, tactical resolutions will appear. Tactical actions do not rise to the level of armed and outright conflict, but war games will be played. Diplomatic tit-for-tat operations will happen more often, and if at some point the issues become too serious, war will be declared. There is no golden age attached to military defeat. One's nation does not just demonstrate scientific and industrial might, it holds such an advantage that it can declare war without hesitation of undue concern. This is the meaning of the sword of truth. The right hand of God wields the truth of God, which ultimately is what destroys evil. We do not fight the flesh because destroying flesh does not destroy evil. Evil resides in the destruction of the Word of God. This, however, is not an invitation of perpetual discussion about the meaning of words and the etymology of expressions. The physical word is confirmation and an encouragement. The truth is written in our hearts. There is no need to discuss the word as if truth was all about doctrine and the right legal wording. We pay our own way as adults, everyone contributes something useful to the group, and power is exercised at the base, rather than center. The key to a godly church is for everyone to be useful, which is interesting considering that 80% of the work in the conventional church is done by 20% of the people. We look back to an age when we not only were engaged in the project that is civilization, but we were also military successful. It was because we were more motivated. We all believed we had a role to play. The highest and most glorious civilization was the Elizabethan age and the decades following it, up until the 1900s when things began to unravel. Perhaps we did not notice because of the wars. We never recovered the glory after the war. The rot only became more visible as the post-war years grew larger. To be clear, the power of England was the